right? And again, nothing wrong with what they did. Tons of players loved it. They were like, oh yes, a new expansion, something to dig my teeth into. I didn't like that. Same thing with League. I was a jungler. They kept changing the jungle. And after like 4 seasons of having to relearn the meta junglers, I was just like, that's it. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. If you want me to play, I'm just going to tinker around on like Sona support or something. Because at least that hasn't changed too much, right? And I don't want to relearn this every time. It's too much change inside of the system. And so in some ways, I'm like, oh, maybe I lean more towards Counter-Strike. Then again, Counter-Strike was not the game for me either. So fair enough. But I think that idea of like, your players are self-selecting in. And now, we do get into that question. Okay, how much change? There's a lot of ways that can go really wrong. If you pick too much, too little, wrong changes versus right changes. And this is, like you described, this is your white whale. How do I change the right thing? The right thing to the right amount at the right time, and really recognizing that it's really not the right thing, but it's just something that ended up working. But how do I know what that is? Like, this is the live service game endless problem that must always be solved in an ever-changing environment.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the toughest questions of because you're basically risking 3 things when you do change. You have 3 things at play. Is how much harder am I making new user acquisition? Mm-hmm. How much am I negatively impacting currently invested players? And how much am I positively impacting currently invested players? Only one of those things is good, but I think as we talked about in the League example, and it's so important that you still need to do it. The thing that makes this more difficult is that if you just take that from a pure design and development and content standpoint, that's a difficult problem, right? Now let's add monetization to the mix. And now let's add, I must do this to create a sustainable business. That says the perfect answer to that triangle is not always the same as the perfect answer to the monetization pitch and how you're monetizing. I believe, and I think this is bore fruit in most games that are for these audiences of, I'll call them core PC players or core console players. The tighter alignment you have between those two answers, the better. The tighter alignment you have between those two, the less waste product you get. And I think that there's no perfect ratio. I don't have like, here's this formula. It's like, it's just freaking hard. If anybody has a formula, reach out on LinkedIn. I'd love to see it. But I think so you have those 2 questions at hand. You have to take that into account first, is what are the monetization needs and what are the gameplay needs? How do I align those as closely as possible as I can? For example, Counter-Strike, let's call Counter-Strike is a low novelty, low change desired environment, whether that's self-selected through players, the gameplay, whatever, right?
Yeah. Well,
luckily, their monetization, while we can talk a lot about children and gambling and CSGO betting sites and all that stuff, like you have to get a different guest on for that one.
Sounds good.
While all that exists and these outcomes are real things to talk about, the gameplay, it is a monetization model that works with no changes to gameplay.
Yeah.
With no new content. And the new content being cosmetically driven purely. That is why that monetization works from a player motivation standpoint in that game. I think Marvel Rivals is pretty good too, because you're like, look, everybody has all the heroes unlocked, and we've got the biggest fire hose of content you've ever seen at a high quality, and we are just going to spray that. We are just going to hit you hard, and we're going to make cool stuff, and you're going to want it because you're going to want cool stuff for your heroes. Awesome. That's our standard. That's your standard run of the mill. If you go to ChatGPT and ask what you should do for live services, it's Marvel Rivals. That's what you should do. It's the obvious answer, and that's not bad. That's sometimes what you should do, and it's right for the game. But they also need to add the gameplay. They need to have, like, it is a place where, man, there is a level where the solved version of this game with no new injections of content, no new balance, no new heroes, and no new maps does reach that point, like I think we talked about in Overwatch, less so, because I think the higher individual agency, where the variety game to game is lower. My ability, and I think what players need when they think about variety from game to game, is not just, well, I want variety for variety's sake. That isn't meaningful. I think Counter-Strike again shows here's the opposite world. It's I want something to anticipate, look forward to, surprise me, or think about. And content injections, while they expire as new and change, provide that change. I think new heroes are one of the better ways to do this, generally speaking, in these types of games. Sometimes new weapons and new systems are. So I hate that I have to tell you, Ben, the answer is there's no perfect answer. But we go back to what do we need to do to keep this game engaging for players, not from I'm logging in and playing. That's the behavior you'll see. Why do they want to log in and play? Oh, they want to continue to rotate on this mastery loop and get better, and they have all these intrinsic motivations. Yes. How long does that go without influence? If the answer is forever, well, actually, maybe don't add anything that you don't have to. If the answer is not forever, okay, how do I drip feed that content at the right pace, the right time, the right disruption level to minimize the downsides and maximize the upside? This is the sauce. You will turn off new players with this change. You will upset some existing players when you do this. The math has to math. You have to make invested players, and not even like high invested players. These changes need to make the game stickier because you are paying a high user acquisition cost. Often, user acquisition costs can be made up through other methods. I love the ARAM example. New player, like League is one of the last games you should get into if you haven't been playing League the last 10 years, right? But you could come in and play TFT or ARAM. There are environments for new users to come into our ecosystem that are not about playing Summoner's Rift. And those are commercially viable and player viable alternatives to Summoner's Rift. I think that's where, once you start getting past like penetration, new user acquisition is really not the name of the game for us. Every game in its life cycle enters that phase. I think that is a part of the natural mortality and aging process of a live service game, and to push against that is like fighting linear time. I think it's a fool's errand. Instead, diversify as you age so that new users have a place to go, even if that place or format or something is not the same as what it has been, because that's actually an opportunity for them to engage in your product where maybe otherwise, unless they really want to bite off more than they can chew, they shouldn't. It also gives a home for lapsed players who don't want that experience, but they will still like a lot about your ecosystem.
If you lead teams in game or software development and you're tired of wasteful and unreliable estimation, I've built an online course just for you. It's called Advanced Estimation for Game and Software Development, and it's a self-paced course with over 15 hours of content, real-world examples, and tools you can start using right away. Estimation doesn't have to be a morale-draining mess. Planning doesn't have to feel unrealistic and contrived. You can do better, and this course will help. Early access is now open with lifetime access and a big launch discount, but there's limited seats at this price point. Check it out at this URL or in the show notes below.